This lecture is about vowels, about the strong or stressable vowels of received pronunciation English. On your handout, you can see a set of schematic diagrams of the vowels. This means that they are arranged conventionally rather than scientifically to show the exact position of the tongue and so on. And the first question we have to ask is, how can we subdivide the rather large set of vowels which English has? How can we subdivide them into smaller sets? And one obvious thing we can take away, extract, is the question of vowel length, because we have short vowels and long vowels. This might seem to be a simple phonetic difference. You measure the duration. If it's not very great, then that's a short vowel. If it's longer, then that's a long vowel. English length is more complicated than that, because the actual duration of English vowels is very susceptible to the effects of the phonetic environment, the surrounding sounds. Which means that so-called short vowels can be quite long. That was a short vowel, of course, it's long. Whereas some long vowels can actually be quite short. And that was a long vowel in the word short. It's interesting that the words long and short have vowels the other way around in their names. So, what is the certain basis for distinguishing short vowels from long vowels? I'm going to suggest to you that the certain basis is the kinds of syllable in which they can occur. And this is something that English shares with the other Germanic languages to varying degrees, but essentially this is true in Swedish, in Danish, in Dutch, in German certainly. But we have two sets of vowels, those that can occur on their own, that is in open syllables, and those that cannot. So there in the green box we have examples of vowels that can be found in a word, syllable, with no consonant following. So we have words like see, bar, stir, day, no. And you will notice that this set comprises the traditional long vowels and the diphthongs. On the other hand, we have another set of vowels which cannot be found without a following consonant, at least in a stressed syllable. The asterisk shows that something is impossible. We cannot have a word si in English. We can't have a word ba in English. We can't have a word sta in English. We can't have a word de. We can't have a word no. Whereas we can perfectly well have words such as sip, bad, stuck, death, knock, where we have the same vowels followed by a consonant. Sometimes these are referred to as free vowels in the green box and checked vowels in the pink box. Checked because they have to be checked by a following consonant. Now this, I'm sure, is the real basis for the feeling which native speakers have that the short vowels constitute a special group. It's obvious to native speakers that even if you say long, even if you say bad, that nevertheless is a short vowel, because we know we can't have it without a following consonant. So that gives us the basis for our first part system, the leftmost box, which is the checked vowels, the vowels that demand a following consonant. And there are 6 of them. There they are with the keywords: kit, dress, trap, strut and phonological terms, English is a bit odd. Most languages have more symmetrical systems than that. We typically find 5 vowels in a language, or 7, or sometimes 3, nicely and neatly arranged, sometimes more than that. English is rather unbalanced because we have this sort of gap up here caused by the fact that the historical vowel strut, which used to be right up with foot, has migrated into a much opener position over the years. Well, what about the remaining vowels? I've subdivided them further into 3 groups depending upon their final tendency, because all of them are diphthongs or may have some diphthongal movement in the first 2 boxes and end up in the centre or opener for the last box. So we first of all have here the long vowel and diphthongs which move towards the close front area, the I area of the vowel space. And there we've got E of fleece, A of face, I of price, and oi of choice. Then we've got those that move towards the close back area, the high back area, which are the oo of goose, the o of goat, and the ow of mouth. The difference between long vowels and diphthongs is not necessarily very clear in English. We conventionally treat E and oo as long vowels, but we could well argue that they're really diphthongs of the type E, oo. You can hear some diphthongal movement there, particularly when it's, you know, at the end of a word with stress and so on. C, to, oo, 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 oo. So that's perhaps an arbitrary distinction, which means it's entirely satisfactory now to put them together in the same category. Now here's our 4th box. These are the vowels that don't move towards close high qualities, but move towards the centre or remain in the centre or opener than that. So these are ear, near, that's meant to be some lambs nearer sheep, nearer fence. Square, nurse, start or thought, and incur. And I put in brackets because this diphthong is gradually disappearing from English. Increasingly, it's replaced by the of thought, so that people say cure rather than cure, and sure rather than sure, tour rather than tour, and so on with all the other words that might have ur. There's something else that's special about the vowels in this category, and that's that they're all likely to be followed by R. Now if you look at the boxes in the middle, that's the E and oo boxes, the vowels, the long vowels in those categories are never followed by R within a word within a morpheme. We just don't have the possibility of E-R, A-R, and so on. I-R is a bit more uncertain. Some people can say things like spiral, others say spiral there to avoid it. But in the rightmost box, these are the vowels very typically followed by R. Of course, they are derived from historical R. And most words that have these vowels are spelt with the letter R. Not necessarily the case, of course, with the start category, which has now been extended over the past 2 or 3 centuries to all sorts of other words, father, last, and so on, which don't have a historical R consonant. Anyhow, anyhow, that provides us then with a breakdown of our 20 different stressable vowels into more manageable